The Vrax Empire had always seen themselves as the pinnacle of power in the galaxy. For centuries, their advanced fleets had crushed civilizations, wiping out species that dared to stand in their way. To them, Earth was nothing more than a speck, a planet with a weak defense system, stuck in the dark ages of space exploration. The Galactic Council laughed when they heard that humanity was preparing for war. They were convinced that no one, especially a species like humans, could ever pose a threat to their superiority. Humanity, however, was not as weak as they appeared. They had spent years in silence, hiding their true capabilities. For too long, Earth had been a target, an object of ridicule among the stars. But now, things were about to change. The human generals and scientists had worked tirelessly to develop something that could challenge the most powerful fleet the galaxy had ever known. The galaxy's perception of Earth as a primitive species would soon be shattered, though no one expected it. In a secret underground base deep within Earth's military headquarters, General David Carter stood in front of a massive screen, watching the Vrax Armada draw closer. The Vrax ships, sleek and monstrous, cast shadows across the solar system. It was the calm before the storm, the silence before the chaos. The countdown had begun. The humans had prepared for this moment, and Carter knew that this was the time for humanity to show the galaxy who they truly were. But it wasn't just about fighting back. It was about surviving. The Vrax weren't just coming to defeat humanity. They were coming to destroy it. "Are we ready?" Carter asked, turning to the officers who stood nearby. His voice was calm, but deep down, he knew the weight of what was about to happen. "We're ready, sir," replied Lieutenant Samira, her voice steady, but with a hint of tension. "All fleets are in position, and the final defense systems are online. We've never had anything like this before, but we'll give them everything we've got." Carter nodded and turned his attention back to the screen. The Vrax ships moved in perfect formation, their alien technology far more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen. Earth's defense fleet, though equipped with advanced weapons and tactics, was still small in comparison. The human fleet was outnumbered, but what they lacked in size, they would make up for in strategy. For years, Earth had been training its soldiers, its scientists, and its engineers for this very moment. They had learned to adapt, to think outside the box, to use every advantage they had. No one knew this better than Carter. The humans had only one shot at this, and he had every intention of making it count. "We're not going to win by fighting them head-on," Carter said, his voice low as he addressed his staff. "We're going to make them fight on our terms. They'll underestimate us, and that's when we'll strike. This isn't just a battle. It's a test of our will to survive." Across the globe, the world watched in silence as the Vrax fleet approached. People who had once felt powerless now stood united, waiting for their planet to be invaded, but determined to defend it at all costs. The air was thick with tension as Earth's leaders made final preparations for the battle ahead. The Vrax thought of humanity as a dying ember, waiting to be snuffed out. What they didn't know was that humanity's flame was burning hotter than ever before. As the Vrax approached, the human fleet took position, hidden behind the shadows of nearby planets. The Vrax would have to enter Earth's orbit to strike, and that was when the trap would be sprung. The Vrax, confident in their power, had no idea what they were walking into. A deep, unsettling silence filled the room as the first wave of Vrax ships crossed into Earth's orbit. Carter stood at the helm of his flagship, watching intently. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded in his chest. The moment of truth had arrived. "This is it," he muttered under his breath. "Hold your ground." As the Vrax ships positioned themselves to strike, the human fleet remained eerily still, cloaked by advanced camouflage technology. The Vrax commanders issued orders to begin the attack, their ships lighting up with the brilliant glow of energy blasts. But nothing happened. For a moment, it seemed as though the Earth had surrendered without a fight. Then, in an instant, the Vrax realized their mistake. The first barrage of weapons came not from the humans, but from hidden positions across the planet. The Earth's defense systems, designed to look like harmless space debris, erupted in a deadly storm of fire. The Vrax ships, taken by surprise, scrambled to respond. Their shields flickered as the human weapons pierced through, targeting their weaknesses. Now, Carter shouted into the comms as the first wave of human ships emerged from hiding, launching a series of missile barrages at the Vrax fleet. The Vrax commanders were caught off guard. They had expected an easy victory, but Earth's tactics were far more complex than they had anticipated. The human ships moved with precision, working as a coordinated unit, picking off the Vrax vessels one by one. Every blast from the human fleet was calculated, every move deliberate. It wasn't just about power. It was about strategy, and humanity's advantage was that they knew how to fight smarter, not harder. The Vrax fleet, though advanced, had grown complacent in its own superiority. They underestimated the human ability to adapt and think on their feet. The first few moments of battle were chaotic, with the Vrax struggling to maintain control over their forces. For the first time in centuries, they were faced with an enemy they couldn't predict. On Earth's surface, citizens watched in awe as the battle raged on in the skies above. The sounds of explosions filled the air, and people huddled together, waiting for news, praying that their forces could hold. News stations across the planet broadcasted live footage of the battle, showing the world the true extent of humanity's fight for survival. No one knew what the outcome would be, but they all knew one thing: Earth would not go down without a fight. As the human fleet continued to push forward, Carter's mind raced. This wasn't just a battle for Earth, it was a battle for the future of humanity. If they lost, it would mean the end of everything they had worked for. But if they won, if they could somehow pull off the impossible, they would prove to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. For now, though, the battle was far from over. The Vrax were still formidable, and the humans had only begun to show their hand. But one thing was certain: the storm was coming, and the Vrax would soon learn that they had underestimated the power of humanity. The tide was turning, and it was only a matter of time before the Vrax would be forced to realize that they had bitten off more than they could chew. The fight had only just begun, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what they were capable of. The battle raged on in the vastness of space, as Earth's fleet fought with everything they had against the mighty Vrax Armada. The Vrax had expected a quick, overwhelming victory. Instead, they were met with resistance unlike anything they had ever experienced. The human forces, though outnumbered, were proving that their ingenuity and resourcefulness could turn the tide of a war. But the Vrax weren't just sitting idly by. They were regrouping, adjusting their tactics, and preparing to strike back with greater force. In the command center aboard Earth's flagship, General Carter stood still, eyes locked on the battle unfolding across the galaxy. His heart raced, his mind racing to process every shift in the battle. He had never expected the fight to be easy, but the Vrax were beginning to regain their composure. They were adapting to humanity's surprise tactics, and Carter knew that they had to press harder, faster, or they would lose the advantage. "Sir, the Vrax are starting to use their heavier artillery," Lieutenant Samira reported. Her voice was steady, but Carter could hear the undercurrent of tension. "They're bringing in reinforcements from the second wave. If we don't act fast, they'll break our lines." Carter's jaw tightened. He knew that their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. The Vrax had underestimated humanity before, but they wouldn't make the same mistake again. The humans couldn't afford to be complacent. Earth's forces had to keep the pressure on. "Get our bombers into position," Carter ordered, his voice low but commanding. "Tell them to target the Vrax command ships. We take out their leadership, and the rest of their fleet will fall apart." The human ships spread out, their formations tighter than ever. Each pilot and soldier was focused, knowing that the fate of their planet hung in the balance. They had no backup plan, no reinforcements coming from outside the solar system. This was it. Earth's survival depended on the outcome of this battle. Outside, the Vrax fleet fired back with relentless fury. Their enormous warships unleashed torrents of laser fire, striking down human fighters and leaving debris floating in the cold vacuum of space. The fight was brutal, the toll rising with each passing minute. But humanity wasn't giving up. They had learned to fight with nothing, to survive against impossible odds. As Carter watched the chaos unfold, a voice broke through his thoughts. "General, we've detected a strange signal coming from the Vrax flagship," Lieutenant Samira reported. "It's encrypted, but it's not like anything we've seen before." Carter's brow furrowed. "Is it a weapon?" "Not exactly," Samira replied. "It seems like a command signal. They're organizing something big. We can't pinpoint the exact nature of it yet." His pulse quickened. The Vrax were planning something. He could feel it in his gut. They weren't just responding to the human fleet. They were preparing for a counteroffensive that could wipe out their forces in one fell swoop. "Any way to stop it?" Carter asked, trying to suppress the rising anxiety in his voice. "We're working on it," Samira said. "But we need time. We're analyzing the signal, but the Vrax have encoded it in ways we didn't anticipate." The minutes dragged on as Carter paced the command center. He glanced at the massive holoscreen in front of him, watching the battle unfold like a terrible dance. The Vrax were relentless, and every move they made seemed calculated to break the humans' resolve. But Earth's fighters were holding steady, pushing back against the onslaught. Despite the mounting casualties, there was something different about this battle, something that felt hopeful. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were fighting back. The fire that had always burned within them was no longer a flicker. It was an inferno. Suddenly, Samira's voice rang out sharply. "General, we've decrypted the signal. They're preparing to launch a superweapon, a massive energy wave designed to wipe out our fleet in one strike. We don't have much time." Carter's stomach dropped. A superweapon. The Vrax were throwing everything they had at them now. He could already see the formation of their energy beams, growing larger, more intense. If they didn't act quickly, this would be the end. "Shut it down," Carter barked. "Do whatever it takes to disrupt their signal." "I'm on it, sir," Samira said, her fingers flying over the controls. The tension in the room grew thicker by the second. Carter watched the holoscreen as the Vrax flagship's weapons powered up, an eerie glow filling the screen. A wave of energy was building, and the human fleet was directly in its path. There was no way they could outrun it. If it hit, it would destroy everything. Just as the first wave of energy shot out from the Vrax flagship, Samira's voice broke through the tension. "We've isolated the command signal, General. I'm initiating a counter-signal now." Carter's eyes locked on the screen as the energy beam from the Vrax flagship faltered, then stopped. The wave of destruction meant for Earth fizzled out, leaving only a small, harmless pulse of energy in its wake. The command center erupted in cheers as the threat was neutralized. Samira turned to Carter, her face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it. We stopped it." But Carter wasn't celebrating. He knew the Vrax wouldn't give up that easily. They had tried to use their greatest weapon, but they still had more at their disposal. This was only a brief respite. "They'll come back," Carter said, his voice low. "They won't stop until they've wiped us out." "We'll be ready," Samira replied, her voice filled with determination. The battle continued, and humanity's resolve was tested like never before. But they were holding their ground, and for the first time, the Vrax were starting to feel the weight of their arrogance. The Galactic Empire that had once scoffed at human tactics was beginning to realize just how wrong they had been. As the fight raged on, Carter's thoughts turned to the future. If they survived today, what would they become? Could humanity stand up to the might of the Vrax and other alien empires? Or would they be crushed under the weight of a galaxy that had long seen them as insignificant? The questions were impossible to answer, but one thing was clear. The Vrax had underestimated humanity, and that would be their downfall. The human spirit could never be so easily broken. As long as there was breath in their bodies, they would fight. They would survive. And in the end, they would prevail. The tide had turned, and the Vraks would soon learn that underestimating humanity was the gravest mistake they could have ever made. You said. The Vraks' fleet loomed ominously over the battlefield, their vast armada casting shadows across the expanse of space. But even as they stared down at Earth's forces, something had shifted in the air. Something palpable, something the Vraks couldn't quite put their claws on. The humans, though smaller in number, had shown resilience, a fierceness the Vraks hadn't anticipated. And now, it seemed, they were doing something that wasn't just surprising. They were forcing the invincible empire to reconsider its entire strategy. In the heart of the Vraks' flagship, the Supreme Commander, Xaroth, paced back and forth, his black-scaled body rippling with the tension of battle. His eyes glinted with impatience. This was supposed to be a simple conquest, an easy victory. Earth's defenses had been weaker than anticipated, their technology primitive. But now, the Vraks were struggling to maintain control of the situation, and it was all because of one thing: the humans' tactics. Report, Xaroth growled, his voice as cold as the depths of space. Commander, the human fleet is showing unexpected resilience. Our forces are taking losses, one of his officers replied, fear creeping into his voice. They're pilots. It's like they've been trained to think in ways we couldn't predict. We lost another cruiser. Their bombs, their attacks, they're unorthodox, but they keep landing. Our systems are scrambling to compensate. Xaroth's fists clenched. This had to be dealt with swiftly. He had expected to crush the humans without even breaking a sweat, but now he realized he had underestimated them. His empire had conquered countless planets, razed civilizations to the ground, and faced far more advanced species with ease. Yet these humans, these fragile creatures, had been unpredictable, and now their unorthodox methods were starting to hit where it hurt most. They're using unconventional strategies, Xaroth muttered, pacing the length of his command room. Think. What do we do now? Perhaps we can use their ingenuity against them, another officer ventured, eyes wide. We could try baiting them, lure them into a trap. Xaroth stopped, his eyes narrowing. A trap? Yes, Commander. We can simulate weakness, lead them into a blind spot, then hit them with everything we've got. Overwhelm them before they can react. Xaroth considered it for a moment, then nodded. Do it. We'll break their will before they can organize again. The Vraks' forces quickly adjusted their formation, pulling back a portion of their fleet, as if retreating. At first glance, it looked like they were withdrawing, but to anyone who understood battle tactics, it was a setup, a feigned weakness. Back on Earth's flagship, General Carter stood at the head of the command table, his mind racing. The battle was far from over, but the Vraks had begun to show signs of hesitation. Their formations weren't as tight, their movements less fluid. Something was off. Carter's gut told him that this was no accident. Sir, the Vraks are pulling back, Lieutenant Samira said, her voice sharp. It's a trick. They're trying to bait us into a false sense of security. Carter's instincts were honed for situations like this. He had been through wars, seen dozens of tactical maneuvers that played on human emotions, but this one felt different. It felt like the calm before the storm, the moment when the enemy would pounce. They're drawing us in, Carter said, his voice low but resolute. They think we'll fall for it, but we won't. Samira glanced at him, eyes wide with surprise. You want to engage them, even with a possible trap? Carter turned his gaze to the screen in front of him, watching the Vraks' ships shift and fall back, creating an opening for the humans to advance. We don't have a choice. If we sit back and wait, they'll gain control of the situation. If we push forward now, we catch them off guard. We can't afford to hesitate. Understood, sir, Samira said, her fingers moving quickly over her console, relaying the orders. As Earth's forces moved into position, Carter's thoughts swirled with doubt. Was this the right move? What if the Vracs were waiting for them? But he quickly pushed the thought away. They were running out of time. They had to make a stand. The Vracs' flagship was now within their sights, and the tension in the command center was palpable. Every soldier, every pilot, every technician was focused on the task ahead. They knew the odds were against them, but this was humanity's fight. They had nothing left to lose. And then it happened. The Vracs struck. The trap they had set was sprung with terrifying precision. A barrage of laser fire erupted from the flanks of the Vracs fleet, catching the humans off guard. Several ships were obliterated in an instant, their crews lost to the void. The human fleet was shaken, their lines broken, and chaos erupted across their formation. But just as quickly, General Carter's voice cut through the panic. Hold formation. Do not scatter. Return fire. All ships, full barrage. The humans responded with the fury of a cornered animal, a primal force that had been unleashed. Their ships fought back with everything they had. They weren't going to go down without a fight. In the midst of the storm, Earth's ships regrouped, striking back with a calculated ferocity that the Vracs hadn't anticipated. The Vracs' flagship, Xerath's ship, became the focal point of the battle. Its dark form loomed above the chaos, a symbol of the Empire's power. But now, as human fighters and bombers converged on the flagship, Xerath realized something he hadn't counted on. Earth's forces weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for their home. And that made them dangerous in ways the Vracs couldn't begin to understand. "We can't hold them off forever, Commander," one of Xerath's officers said, panic creeping into his voice. "They're focusing all their attacks on us." Xerath's cold eyes flickered with something akin to realization. These humans weren't just showing resilience. They were showing the kind of fury that could bring even the mightiest empire to its knees. "Retreat. Get us out of here," Xerath commanded, but it was too late. The Vracs' flagship was hit, a massive explosion rocking the vessel. It was a moment of chaos. The mighty empire, so sure of its victory, now found itself teetering on the brink of disaster. The humans had found their weakness, and they weren't going to let go. The flagship's hull cracked under the strain of the human barrage. Xerath, the once untouchable commander of the Vracs, had never been more afraid. He had underestimated the humans. And now, it was too late to correct that mistake. As the Vracs fleet scrambled to regroup, Earth's ships pressed forward with unrelenting force, the fury of the human race manifesting in every strike. The once mighty Vracs Armada, which had scoffed at human tactics, now faced a reckoning, and the galaxy watched as their empire began to crumble under the weight of their arrogance. This was only the beginning, but one thing was clear. Humanity had proven that they were not to be underestimated. The Vracs were learning the hard way, and soon, every empire in the galaxy would know that Earth would never be an easy target again. The aftermath of the brutal skirmish between Earth's fleet and the Vracs was one of eerie silence. The vastness of space, usually filled with the hum of engines and the roar of lasers, felt almost hollow as both sides assessed the damage. Earth's fleet had suffered heavy losses, but the Vracs were in disarray, their once formidable armada reduced to burning wrecks and drifting hulks. For the first time in the battle, the Vracs seemed uncertain, and that uncertainty was a dangerous thing. On Earth's flagship, General Carter stood at the center of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the view screen as it flickered between images of burning ships and shattered debris. He had always known that Earth's military wasn't the largest, wasn't the most technologically advanced, but what they lacked in size, they made up for with ingenuity. They had done the impossible. They had struck back at the Vracs, and they had done it with a ferocity the enemy hadn't expected. But victory wasn't won yet. "Sir," Lieutenant Samira said, her voice cutting through the tension, "we've picked up transmissions from the Vracs. They're scrambling their remaining forces, but they've begun retreating." "We've forced them to pull back." Carter didn't speak immediately, his mind processing the information. The Vrax had retreated once before in this battle, only to come back stronger. But this time, it felt different. They were shaken, disoriented, and perhaps more importantly, they were afraid. The very thought of fear in the Vrax's eyes made Carter feel something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. "Good. Keep monitoring their movements, but don't relax just yet," Carter replied, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of responsibility. "We know what they're capable of. This might just be a regrouping maneuver. Stay sharp, everyone." As the crew scrambled to maintain their positions, Carter walked over to the window that overlooked the battle. His thoughts drifted back to the humans who had fought so fiercely. Every pilot, every soldier, every technician had given their all. The battle wasn't over, but they had proven something that day. They had proven that they could stand against the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Meanwhile, on the Vrax flagship, Kazaroth was pacing again, his anger boiling over like a raging storm. His claws dug into the cold metal floor as he struggled to contain his frustration. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans had been an insignificant species, their tactics rudimentary at best. Yet somehow, they had shattered the Vrax's invincible facade. His mind raced as he tried to understand what went wrong. "They should have crumbled under our attack," Kazaroth muttered to himself, his voice barely a whisper. Why didn't they? His second in command, a hulking Vrax warrior named Rolk, stepped forward cautiously. "Commander, perhaps we underestimated them. They fought back with more than just weapons. Their unpredictability, their willingness to sacrifice for each other. It's unlike anything we've encountered before." Kazaroth whirled on him, his eyes narrowing. "Unpredictability? You mean they fought back like animals? They attacked like desperate creatures without any discipline or strategy. It should have been easy." Rolk, though clearly hesitant, remained calm. "That's just it, Commander. It wasn't easy. Their desperation gave them strength. Their unpredictability made them difficult to track, impossible to anticipate. It's a strategy we've never had to face before. We expected order, strategy, precision. Instead, we got chaos. And it worked." Kazaroth let out a long, frustrated hiss, pacing again. The words gnawed at him. Chaos. He had been trained to predict, to plan for everything. But the humans had defied logic. Their tactics didn't follow any known patterns, and that was precisely why they had won this battle. The Vrax were powerful, but they had been predictable. The humans, on the other hand, weren't. It was something that no empire in the galaxy had ever faced before, and now they were paying the price for it. "We can't let this happen again," Kazaroth growled, his voice full of venom. "We'll crush them before they have a chance to regroup." Rolk looked at him, and for the first time, Kazaroth saw a flicker of doubt in his second-in-command's eyes. "They've seen our weaknesses, Commander. We cannot underestimate them again. If we strike too soon, we may not have the advantage." Kazaroth stared at him, anger flashing in his eyes. "We will strike when I say so. Rolk, you forget your place." But inside, Kazaroth couldn't shake the feeling that Rolk was right. The humans had learned. They had seen the cracks in the Vrax armor, and they would exploit them if given the chance. And this time, Kazaroth couldn't allow them that chance. Back aboard Earth's fleet, Carter received the latest transmission. The Vrax were indeed pulling back, but they weren't retreating completely. The battle had shifted, but it wasn't over. The humans had dealt a blow, but they knew the Vrax would be back, stronger, more determined. "General," Samira said, looking up from her console, "the Vrax are regrouping. They've activated their remaining reserve fleets. They're going for a full-scale offensive. It's not over yet." Carter felt a coldness settle in his gut. He had expected this, but now it wasn't just a matter of fighting back. It was a matter of survival. The Vrax were going to come for them with everything they had, and Earth's fleet wasn't ready for another full-on assault. They needed time to repair, to regroup, to reinforce. And they didn't have much time. "We need to get ahead of them," Carter said, his voice low but firm. "We'll have to fight again, but this time, we don't wait for them to attack. We go on the offensive." Samira's eyes widened, and she nodded in agreement. "Understood, sir. I'll relay the orders." As the orders were passed down the chain of command, Carter took a deep breath. His heart was heavy with the burden of the decisions ahead, but he knew one thing. Humanity wasn't going to roll over. They weren't going to submit to the Vrax. This war was far from over, and the next battle would determine the fate of Earth, and perhaps the galaxy. The stars seemed to burn brighter now, as if they too were watching, waiting for what would come next. The Vrax had underestimated humanity once before, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. As Earth's fleet steeled itself for the next confrontation, one thing became clear. The Vrax had just awoken a force they couldn't control. And now, humanity was ready to show them what it meant to stand on the battlefield, not just as survivors, but as warriors. "You said." The silence that followed the brutal battle was almost suffocating. The remnants of the Vrax fleet floated in space, a deadly reminder of the consequences of underestimating humanity. Earth's fleet had managed to survive, and though they had lost ships and lives, they had struck a blow to the heart of the Vrax war machine. It was a victory, but it didn't feel like one. The cost of war was heavy, and General Carter couldn't afford to let his guard down. On board the flagship, Carter paced back and forth, his mind racing with the possibilities. The Vrax were regrouping, pulling their forces together for another strike. They had seen humanity's strength, but they would not back down easily. They would come for Earth with everything they had. Carter could feel it in his bones. "General," Lieutenant Samira's voice broke through his thoughts. "We've intercepted another communication from the Vrax. They're forming a new fleet. They're planning a counterattack, and this time, it's going to be bigger than anything we've faced before." Carter didn't respond immediately. He stared at the view screen, where the blackness of space stretched endlessly before him. It was impossible to predict what the Vrax would do next, but he knew they couldn't afford to wait. The next move had to be theirs. "We'll take the fight to them," Carter said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "Prepare the fleet. We leave in 20 minutes." The crew worked quickly to relay the orders, each member of the fleet understanding the gravity of the situation. They had won the first round, but now they had to go on the offensive. The Vrax might be powerful, but Earth had something they didn't: ingenuity and the will to fight against impossible odds. As the fleet gathered its strength and prepared for the next battle, the Vrax warlord Saroth was deep in thought aboard his flagship. The anger that had once burned within him had cooled into something colder, more calculating. He had underestimated humanity, and that mistake had nearly cost him everything. Now, he would make sure it didn't happen again. "Commander, the humans have prepared to strike," Rolk, his second-in-command, reported. "They've gathered their forces and are heading towards us. It seems they're ready for another battle." Saroth's eyes narrowed as he considered the situation. So, they'd finally learned. They want to fight us on our terms. They'll regret that decision. He turned to his tactical officer, a Vrax strategist named Zafar. "What do we know about their fleet? Have they made any new modifications since the last skirmish?" Zafar tapped a few keys on his console and brought up a series of data feeds. "The humans have made some improvements. Their ships are reinforced with new energy shields, and they've modified their weapons to fire in rapid bursts. It seems they've learned how to fight us more effectively." Saroth clenched his fists. "They may have learned something, but they're still no match for us. Their ships are small, their fleets limited. We will crush them under our might." Rolk hesitated. "Are you sure, Commander? The last battle cost us dearly. Perhaps we should wait, reinforce our position, and prepare more forces. We can't afford another loss." Saroth fixed his second-in-command with a fierce stare. "Do not question me, Rolk. We strike now. while they are still reeling from their temporary victory. If we hesitate, they will gain the upper hand, and I will not allow that. The Vrax fleet readied itself for the confrontation. Xarath's mind was set. This time, there would be no room for error. He would destroy the humans and their pitiful fleet once and for all. Meanwhile, aboard Earth's flagship, Carter stood in front of a holographic map of the galaxy, his finger tracing the path they would take. They had no illusions about the challenge ahead. The Vrax would come at them with overwhelming force, but Earth's fleet had one advantage. They were fighting for survival. And survival was something humans had never taken lightly. The fleet moved into position, each ship taking its place. The battle was imminent, and the crew was ready. But Carter knew that this time, the stakes were even higher. The Vrax would not back down easily, and their thirst for domination had only grown stronger. The humans would have to fight with everything they had, or they wouldn't make it out alive. "General, the Vrax are approaching," Samira reported, her voice tense. "They've already begun their assault. We're outnumbered, but we have the element of surprise." Carter nodded grimly. "Let's use it. Move the fleet into position, and make sure the crew is ready. This is our chance to end this once and for all." The battle began in earnest, the blackness of space shattered by the explosions and flashes of energy weapons. Earth's fleet fired in precise bursts, the rapid-fire shots finding their mark and disabling several Vrax ships in quick succession. The Vrax, though larger and more heavily armed, were caught off guard by the humans' unorthodox tactics. But the Vrax were not without their own strategy. They fought back with a vengeance, launching waves of fighters and heavy bombardments. Their massive warships fired enormous energy beams that tore through the vacuum of space, targeting the humans' weaker vessels. But Earth's fleet had a trick up its sleeve: maneuverability. The humans moved swiftly, dodging the Vrax's strikes and returning fire with deadly precision. It was a dance of destruction, with both sides desperately trying to outmaneuver the other. Carter watched the battle unfold, his heart pounding in his chest. The Vrax were powerful, but humanity had proven time and again that they could adapt, learn, and overcome. "General, we've taken heavy losses," Samira called out. "Several ships have been disabled, but we're still holding our ground." "Keep going," Carter ordered, his voice firm. "We fight for Earth, for our people. Hold them back as long as we can." The battle raged on, each side exchanging blows with relentless fury. But for the first time in the conflict, the Vrax seemed to be losing ground. Their ships were starting to fall back, retreating in the face of the humans' surprising resilience. Carter couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, but he knew this was only the beginning. The humans had struck back, and the Vrax had learned to fear them. But as the battle continued to unfold, one thing became clear: this war wasn't over. And as long as the Vrax remained a threat, humanity would never stop fighting. The stars had witnessed humanity's wrath, but the Vrax hadn't seen anything yet.